So good morning. So today we will be discussing a few probable current affairs questions for the mains. Okay, these are few current affairs which are related to 2024, but it will be useful for you as well. So we'll see the structure. How do we structure an answer? So it's not the usual mains marathon sessions as such. We'll be discussing a few questions. We'll be taking a few current affairs questions, and based on that, what are the probable questions that will be asked, and we will structure the answers for that. Okay. So, what is the formal structure of an answer? What are the formal structures? How do you structure an answer? You should have a introduction, right? The content and conclusion, right? So depending on the question, you should analyze whether it requires way forward or not. Not all questions require way forward. Because somebody has asked you to write way forward, you started writing way forward in all the answers. So depending upon the question, you should analyze whether it requires way forward or not. And moreover, what is the word limit? You know that your mains answer question paper will consist of 10 mark questions and 15 mark questions. So 10 mark question is for 150 words, and 15 mark is for 250 words. Earlier there used to be 20 mark questions also, but for the past few years it's just 10 and 15. Okay. So 250 words means ideally 2.5 pages. For a person with normal handwriting and normal spacing, it's 2.5 pages for 250 words. So 150 should be ideally 1.5 to 2 pages. Okay, so this should be the word limit or the length of your answer. Next is, what is it asked for? So one major problem that we have seen while correcting your answers is that you have a typical way of answering, a similar way of answering to all the questions. No matter whether the question is asking for compare and contrast, or whether it is only contrast, whether it is describe or discuss, you are writing a similar answer for all the questions. Every word means different things, and it should require different way of answering also. So we will discuss a few such questions as well. Now, whether you should write in bullets or paragraphs. This is a very common doubt which everybody asks. This is actually based on your convenience and your presentation skills. If you are really good at presenting answers, paragraph form of answering is also good. But if not, bullet points are actually easy for the examiner to analyze your answers. That's the reason why everybody goes for bullet points. But if the question is regarding your personal opinion, then the bullet points doesn't suit the nature of the question. Okay, so depending upon the kind of the question also, you should know whether you should write it in bullet points or whether you should write it in paragraphs. If you are writing it in paragraphs, remember to underline the keywords. Okay, suppose if the question actually, yes, please settle down. If the question particularly mentions, so we are actually discussing a few current affairs question answer session for the mains. Okay. If the question particularly asks about 3 aspects, then you will not be having many bullet points to write. In that case, it should be written in paragraphs. Okay. Then another thing is conclusion. See, sometimes the question will be in a negative form. The question itself will be in a negative connotation. But when you conclude that answer, it should always end in a positive note. It should always end with a way forward, especially the questions which are very controversial. Okay, so keep that in mind. And this is something which nobody uses. Use of semicolons. You have a tendency to merge 2 or 3 sentences using and you make the sentence very big. You make the sentence very lengthy. So do not use such compound sentences. Okay, you can use compound sentences, but make sure it is not very lengthy and it's not very complex for the students, for the examiner to understand. Instead, you can use semicolons. Okay, semicolons, but I have rarely seen people using semicolons in their answers, but try to make use of semicolons while you're writing answers. So now, a few question words that you actually need to know, the differences which you actually need to know while writing an answer. When the question is about analyze, which means that you have to divide the question, you have to divide it into different parts and analyze each, the pros and cons, the advantages and disadvantages of each parts. That's how you write an analyze question. The other one is assess the question. What do you mean by assessment? You are actually examining whether the given statement is right or wrong. So that is what is meant by assessing. And while you conclude an assessment statement or assessment question, you have to state how far you are in agreement with the original proposition. Okay, whether you are able to agree with it or not. If you are not able to agree with it, what are the suggestions that you suggest to improve it? Okay. Now clarify means you are clarifying, you are describing it in a very simple way. Okay. It could be mostly related to any theoretical question. Clarify something, which means that analyze the aspects of it, describe it in very simple language. Comment upon, asking for your opinion. Compare. Compare is what? You have to compare two different variables or two different things with the similarities and dissimilarities. Consider is you are just thinking, you are just mentioning, you are thinking an observation about a particular topic. You are considering that topic. Okay. Now, most of the questions will be compare and contrast. What is the difference between compare and contrast? They are more or less the same. But the difference is that in comparison, when you are comparing two different entities, you write both the similarities and dissimilarities. But while contrasting it, you should write similarities, but more than similarities, your focus should be more on dissimilarities. You are contrasting it. Okay, that's the slight difference. When the question is about comparison, equal weightage should be given to similarities and dissimilarities. Where the question is about contrasting, more importance should be given to the disadvantages. Okay. Now critically evaluate. You are evaluating the statements in a critical way. So after the critical assessment, you should come to a final conclusion. Okay. And justify, like that's what the justifications you have given in your answer. Justify why you made such a choice. That is the critical evaluation questions. Definers, you are defining the terms, the meanings of the statement. Demonstrators, with examples, you are illustrating the answers. Describe is also more or less same as define, but the difference is that in description, you are elaborating your answer. Discuss is a written debate. Most of the questions are discuss type. Okay, you are writing all the advantages and disadvantages, and then you are finally come to a conclusion. Elaborate, as I said, is to describe this question. Evaluate is mostly critical evaluation. Okay, you are critically evaluating it. Examine, just analyze. You are looking at it at a closer level. Okay, so it should be multidimensional. You should look at the issue, look at the problem from all the angles. That's how you write an exam question. Explain, explore, give an account of, all these are detailed. You can understand it. As the name suggests, give an account, which is just a peripheral form. You don't have to go in depth to the question. Identify, illustrate is as well explained with examples. Interpret is what? Demonstrate your an analysis or demonstrate your idea of that topic. That is what is interpret, how you interpret that particular question. Justify, see, justification can be, you can either agree with the statement or you can disagree with the statement. But the difference is that whether you agree or disagree, you should have the justification, you should have the evidence for that. Okay. Now outline is just the main points. Review is actually what? Assessment. Show how. Show how means How does it happen? Why does it happen? What are the factors that led to it? All this. Okay. So in such a question, you don't have to go in depth, but you require more points to the question. Okay. Points should be more. Status, just state the terms and the key points to it. Do not have bigger explanations or bullet points, so many bullet points for a single heading. That's what is meant by state. Summarize, and to what extent? Summarize is the condensed version. To what extent? To what extent you are actually, how far this is correct. So there also you have to provide evidences. Okay. We'll see questions and then you'll understand. But the first page, analyze, compare and contrast, compare, just comparison, describe, all these things you should discuss, all this you should keep in mind. Okay. Most of the questions are from that part. Where is the question? Oh. Just a minute. So this question was, state the contributions of ancient Indian scholars to the field of mathematics, astronomy and medical sciences. So it's particularly mentioning the three fields. Which are the three fields? Mathematics, astronomy and medical sciences. We are not going into the details of this answer, but we will just see how the answer should be written. Okay. So in the introduction, I have mentioned about the leaders, the scholars who are actually related to this field. Okay. Aryabhatta, Brahmagupta, Bhaskara and Sushruta Charaka. These are the famous scholars who are related to the fields of mathematics, astronomy and medical sciences. The question is basically related to these three fields. Okay. Now, the contributions of ancient Indian mathematicians. So, in the first paragraph, I have divided it into three paragraphs. The content I have divided it into three paragraphs. The first paragraph deals with the contributions in the mathematics, contributions to the mathematics. The second one is astronomy and the third one is medical sciences. But in the third paragraph, see, when you are writing such a question, you should also you should not forget to write the important contributions. For example, in the mathematics, we have the contribution of zero and calculus. Isn't it? And in the astronomy is the Earth's circumference and the length of the sidereal year. Sidereal year is actually with respect to a sidereal means star. How much time does the Earth take to orbit the Sun and come back to its original position? That is what is known as sidereal year. Okay. So this was a major contribution in the astronomy. So the famous book in astronomy is Surya Siddhanta. So when such a question is asked, everybody will be writing about the major books, especially medical sciences. We are the father of, he is the father of surgery, another one is the father of medicine. Charaka Samhita and Sushruta Samhita. This book should be mentioned. Okay. Now, how this has led to the modern knowledge of mathematics, science and astronomy. This is how you structure it. Okay. So basically, when any question related to art and culture is mentioned, you should not forget to mention the basic contributions. They are major contributions and also with the books and books. Mentioning of books is very important. The art and culture of the Vijayanagara Empire were not only expressions of aesthetic excellence but also instruments of political legitimacy and religious consolidation. Okay, so here the question is, art and culture of Vijayanagara Empire, but how did it contributed to the political legitimacy and religious consolidation of Vijayanagara Empire? So In case if you're not able to remember when exactly was the Vijayanagar Empire was there, you can write the century. The Vijayanagar Empire, but you should know the century as well. Okay. Were far more than a mere display of aesthetic brilliance, and now it has two parts. How did it contribute to political legitimacy, and how did it contribute to the religious consolidation? So I have divided it into two parts, where political legitimacy into monumental art, how did it do? Propaganda of power. All the symbols of like Virupaksha temple at Hampi, Vitala temple at Hampi, they served as the symbols of royal power and divine authority. Then divine connection, all the temple paintings, they were associated with the royal processions and courtly life. It shows the political power of these kings. Now patronage and the loyalty, the king, they secure the loyalty of the subjects. So that means that they created a loyal elite group of artisans. Okay. Now religious cohesion and identity. So this is another problem. See, art and culture you can write, but how did it lead to the religious identity of the Vijayanagar Empire? That is something which requires a little more thought. So you can write like, it supported both Vaishnavism and Shaivism, but mostly during that time, they either supported either one of this. Most of the dynasties, they supported either one of this, but that was not the case with Vijayanagara Empire. Now it fostered an inclusive approach. See, when you are using such terms in your answer, remember to underline those things. Okay. Now, unified Hindu identity. Unified Hindu identity is, have you heard of Hoysala architecture? Hoysala is also in Karnataka. So, Hoysala architecture is actually a combination of Dravida and Nagara style. Dravida is the South Indian style, Nagara is the North Indian style. So, it's a combination of both. Whereas the Vijayanagara Empire, they have a unique style of architecture, which means that they shared a cultural identity. There was a cultural identity in their place. Then, how did music and dance led to this cultural consolidation of the Vijayanagara Empire? One is that, as I said before, the cultural elite, creating a cultural elite, public spectacles, like there is an account of some of the famous travelers during that time, how lavishly or how extravagantly they have celebrated some of the religious festivals. It was actually to show the royal power, the royal prideness. So this is how you structure it. We will not go into the details of the answers, okay? You can read it out, but how do we write different answers? That's what we do. So GS1 particularly deals with what? How did the work of history, right? So this is modern history. Question from modern history, the two were part of art and culture. How did the work of nationalists within the Legislative Council foster the advancement of the national movement in India? So you should talk about the Gopalakrishna Gokhale, Dadabhai Naoroji and Surendranath Banerjee, who were members of the Legislative Council, and how they used this platform to foster national movements in India. So here also, you can write it in bullet points, or whether if you have good points, like it basically only 3 points are there. You can actually make it more points by subdividing these 3 points. Okay, if you're good at explaining it, better go for this. Now, legislative, one is to create awareness and mobilize public opinion. The other one is as a legislative work, they use this for as a training ground for the future leaders. And then they also use this as a forum for political education. Dadabhai Naoroji talked about the drain of wealth. So they were able to convince the leaders with evidences. So these are the ways in which it is written. So it's basically how they use this forum for political education and how they use this as a legislative platform and how they use it as a training ground. If you have only 3 or 4 points, remember to make it a paragraph. If you have so many points to write, remember to write it as bullet points. Okay. Now, rapid and unplanned urbanization in India is leading to a growing paradox. Cities are becoming water stressed, receiving high rainfall. In this context, critically analyze the challenges of water management in Indian cities and discuss the potential of smart city concepts and traditional water harvesting techniques as sustainable solutions. Here the problem is, the question is asking about critically analyze the challenges of water management. So when something is asking you to critically analyze or to analyze the challenges of something, you'll have a tendency to write the solution for it. That's the normal way of answering it. But here, the question itself suggests you two solutions: sponge city concept and traditional water harvesting techniques. Okay, so how do you, this should be your solutions. In addition to that, you can write solutions, but you don't have to explain about it. But you have to understand the feasibility of these two solutions. Okay, so here, what are the challenges? Why are the urban cities becoming water stressed? Extensive concretization of urban landscape, drastic decline in the groundwater level, then pollution, water, making the water unusable, all these things, the content. And what is smart city? You are using the urban, like green spaces, permeable pavements, rooftop gardens. These are the smart city concept. Okay, so using this to as a solution to your water stress problems in the urban cities. In addition to that, it also talks about the traditional techniques. So what are the traditional techniques? One is construction of check dams, step wells, community level water harvesting, all this. Okay, so remember to mention about the traditional techniques as well. The question is only about talking about the traditional techniques, so you should mention what are the traditional techniques which are used in the urban water management. Now, glacier melting in Himalayan, and evaluate the preparedness of Indian states in mitigating. Discuss the key drivers of this rapid melting and evaluate the preparedness of Indian states in mitigating the associated risks. So the question is not asking about the what are the preparedness, what are the measures which are taken by the Indian states. It's asking you to evaluate it, right? So this question is for 250 words. So which means that you do not have much scope for detailed explanation. Here, what are the key drivers of rapid melting? We are just mentioning it: climate change, changing monsoon patterns, unplanned development and deforestation. Then what are the preparedness and mitigation which are taken by the Indian states? One is early warning system, disaster management, community engagement. Now, to effectively mitigate the risk associated, in case if you do not have space for your way forward, you can write that as a conclusion. Okay, by not explaining the topic, but you can just mention the headings like scientific monitoring, robust infrastructure planning, community participation, etc. if you are short of time and if you are short of space. Okay, but remember to have it, especially in a question which asks about challenges. If it does not particularly mention about any solutions, go for other solutions as well. What are the strategies that India can adopt to harness its demographic dividend over the next decade? So it's basically about the National Family Health Survey, which was conducted last year. Okay, this was a question based on that. So when you have such censuses, like for next year, you may have certain data of the census which will be coming up. So if such a question is asked, you should remember to quote the facts. Here as well, here, what the percentage of the population which are below the age of 35, how it is contributing to the demographic dividend, all this is written. And enhanced skill development, what are the strategies that India, so it's basically asking about what? The way forward. This is it's a kind of way forward, right? So you don't really have to write way forward in such type of answers. It's just the body part. So in such cases, you should go for bullet points. Why? Because you do not have it's not a multi-dimensional question. It's straight away asking you the strategies. So you should have more strategies there. Okay. Enhance skill development and education, promote female labor force participation. Whenever you make out about such things from any government data, facts and figures should be there. Boost job creation in manufacturing and services. Then improve health and social infrastructure. Leverage migration and urbanization. So these are the strategies which you should adopt to make use of the demographic dividend. Okay. Discuss the major emerging and changing patterns of marriages in India and the factors driving these changes. So traditionally, so the question is about the changing patterns of marriages in India, right? So when the question is about the changing patterns, you should actually write about the factors which was already in existence, right? without mentioning about the already existing patterns, how do you mention about the changing patterns? So just in one or two sentences, you can mention about the already existing techniques, which is like based on caste, religion, and family alliances, and what are the changes which is happening to the emerging changes which is happening to the marriages. One is delayed. This is a data from the national. This is also data from the National Family Health Survey. So you should quote the facts like delayed age of marriage, decline in arranged marriages, intercaste and interfaith marriages, shift in dowry practices and reverse dowry, where in Punjab and Haryana, men particularly gives dowry to the women to get married to them. Emergence of new forms of relationship, factors drive, and what are the question has two parts. What are the factors driving these changes? So there you can write education, economic, urbanization, legal and policy framework, globalization. I mean, see, you should understand one thing. When the question is very general, like this is a very general question, this is very social, society related concept. So in such questions, while answering such questions, you should have more points. Okay, any question which is general in nature should have more points, more valid points. And if possible, try to remember the facts for such questions, because everybody can write the answers, right? It's a very general question, anybody can write. So if such a question is asked, you should have facts and figures to make your answer look more presentable and more valid. Now, the question is only about the changing pattern. The question does not ask about your opinion whether it is good or bad. But anyways, it's a general question where you will always have your opinion. So you should write the present challenges. It actually has certain challenges, but even then it will provide they should be able to balance both the traditional and the modern techniques, the changing patterns. What are the factors that led to the Swiss crisis of 1956? How did it alter the regional balance of power? This is a world history question. Okay. So what was Swiss Canal crisis about in 1956, and what are the factors? So in the introduction, if you do not have much things to write, you can briefly mention what actually led to the Suez Canal crisis. Like it was actually the problem between France, Britain, and between Egypt. Okay. Now in detail you are writing it. Denial of economic aid by US and Britain. This is your world history. Okay, you will be studying all this. Egypt's closeness with the Soviet Union, France issue with the Egypt, violation of the Anglo-Egyptian Treaty, Israel's support to Britain and France. Now, how did it impact the regional balance in that area? New phase of Arab nationalism, decline of European influence, intensifying Arab-Israel conflict, strengthening Soviet presence, involvement of the USA in the Middle East. So basically, this question is two parts, and the two parts actually have a lot of points as well. Okay, so this should be written in. When you have more points, write it in bullet. When you have two parts of the question also, write it in bullets. Okay, under different subheadings. How did India's position at the crossroads of ancient trade routes facilitate cultural exchange with multiple regions of the world? This is related to culture. So India is at the crossroads of many traditional routes. So the problem here is we always remember about our Silk Route, but we forget about our sea routes. Okay, so that should also be mentioned here. Then how did that happen? Like how did this cultural exchange happen because of the trade routes? One is cultural exchange to the universities, mentioned about our Nalanda, Taxila universities. Silk Road as a cultural bridge. How does Silk Road led to Buddhist learning centers? Actually, basically, these were the resting places of the traders, which later became the learning places. Now, cultural exchange to the trade, like we had trade with Central Asia, Middle Eastern and other countries. Spread of languages, Sanskrit was used in Cambodia. Foreign influences, how did these foreigners, they influence the education, culture, art, architecture of our Indian society? Self-help groups, critically analyze is a powerful tool for social and economic empowerment of women. Critically analyze the statement highlighting the role in poverty alleviation and social cohesion. So it's actually not about the social and economic importance of this self-help groups. It's talking about What is their role in poverty alleviation and social cohesion? So two particular issues are given to you. So you should analyze the role of self-help groups in these two areas. Okay, you don't have to explain in detail about the other areas. The focus should be based on poverty alleviation and social cohesion. Economic empowerment and poverty alleviation, financial inclusion, micro enterprises. Then what is the social empowerment support system, voice and leadership, addressing social issues. Then it's about the self-help groups. Challenges and hurdles should be there. Operational, like it is basically asking about the women empowerment, right? For the women, it focuses on the women. Poverty alleviation, social cohesion of the women as well. So then there will be certain challenges and hurdles associated with it. So that's why it should be mentioned. Here you should remember one thing. If you see, I do not have many points. It's just 3 or 4 points itself. Okay. But if you have a way forward, if you have challenges to write, so while seeing the question, you should know whether you'll be writing the challenges of the question, whether you'll be writing the way forward for the question. In that cases, you should be careful to write only 3 or 4 points. Do not write or half a page or full page of points itself, and then because otherwise you'll find short of space to write the challenges or the way forward. Okay, so while reading the question, you should plan it, and then like condense it into 3 or 4 points. So it's easy to make a lot of points. It's very difficult to condense it or merge the points and make it 2 or 3 points. Okay, so start practicing it now. Now, contrary to the popular perception that urban Indian families are going nuclear, people are choosing to live in extended families in urban India. So what are the discuss? Whether it is good or bad, what are the factors which are leading to it, all these things. So here it talks about the basic facts which are given in the National Family Survey. Factors which are responsible for people choosing in extended families. One is economic factors, then mutual support system, cultural values, mental well-being and social connect. Now, it does not ask you for your opinion. If you have an opinion, you can state it. You can write whether it is a good or bad things, good or bad. Okay. But remember, the ending line should never be in a negative connotation. How has globalization facilitated the emergence of a new youth culture in India? Okay, globalization related questions are also very important. Now, shift in the cultural celebration, entertainment, preferences. You started like you have a lot of exposure to the social media. You started celebrating the events which are happening globally, like your Valentine's Day, Friendship Day. These are all not very popular among the Indian youths before. Cultural hybridization, unique identities which they draw from local traditions and global trends. For example, the fusion of the food. If you remember, it was Deepika Padukone who actually made this humma that she famous. It's a Bhutanese national dish. So likewise, all the cuisines, there's a into Korean cuisine as well. Kimchi paratha is an into Korean fusion. Okay, so the food items, the culinary items, that's a cultural hybridization. Materialism and consumerism. Globalization, you know that it led to a consumerism among the people. Then changing family dynamics, the youth's attitude towards family, the marriages, relationship. See, one thing you should remember here, sometimes in the question paper, there will be 2 or 3 questions which are of the similar nature. For example, here, changing family dynamics is a sub-point over here. And the earlier question, we actually talked about the changing pattern of the marriages among the Indian youths. So, we will have a tendency to repeat the statements. Okay, make sure that you do not repeat your points in your answer sheet. You can quote the facts, that's okay, but never repeat the statements. Okay, and also a similar question, if a question is being asked in GS2 and GS3, the way it should be answered is also different. You should not have the same way of answering the questions in both GS2 and GS3. For example, your Indo-US, if an India-US question if a question is related to India and US in GS2 and GS3, in GS2 it should cover multidimensional. It should not just be economical point of view. It should be how it is affecting our diplomacy, how it is affecting geopolitically, all these factors should be covered there. Whereas if the question is in the GS3 paper, it should focus more on the economic part. Okay, that's the way you make certain differences in your answers while writing GS2 and GS3 papers. Awareness and advocacy. Globalization has heightened awareness among youth about the global issues, all these points. Okay. See, these points you can make use, you can write it in other questions also when it is related to globalization. Now GS2. GS2 is polity, constitution, governance, international affairs, government schemes related. All this comes under your GS2 paper. So the increasing use of central agencies for investigations in the state, coupled with the frequent use of governor's office to withhold assent to the state bills, has strained the concept of cooperative federalism. The question is basically about cooperative federalism. Critically analyze the statement. You will have your political opinion on this. Restrict your political opinion, but the question itself is asking you to criticize the over usage of these investigative agencies. So you should write it, but your tone of writing should be mild. Never criticize the government in a very strong language. Okay, you are also prepared, you are trying to be part of the same government, right? So never criticize never use strong languages against the government. Okay, so such questions should be dealt very carefully. Central agencies and political Vedanta, allegations of, that even when you become part of the civil service, there are certain protocols which you have to keep, right? So this is also a part of that. Okay. Allegations of misuse. Opposition-led rule states frequently accuse the central agencies like the ED and CBI of being used for political Vedanta. We are not writing it is actually like that. We are saying that opposition rule states are making such an opinion that they are actually using it for they are misusing it. Okay, it's not our statement. Remember that it's not our statement. We are just quoting it, quoting somebody else's statement there. Okay, undermining the state autonomy, erosion of trust, the governor's office and the executive overreach. So why this question was asked? Mainly because there was a Supreme Court ruling regarding the governor was not giving assent to particular bills, state government bills in Tamil Nadu and Kerala. So time frame was actually set and later the time frame was taken back. So this was the issue which led to this question. So that case should be mentioned here. When a current affairs related question, if it is based on any Supreme Court judgment, that judgment should be mentioned in your answer. Here it is the state of Punjab versus Union of India case. This question. Okay. Withholding assets, governors have been criticized for indefinitely withholding assets, undermining legislative sovereignty, judicial intervention. Now, what are the consequences and violation of constitutional principles? Centralization, what are the consequences? If it is being used, what are the consequences? One is centralization of power, the other one is contradiction of commission's recommendations, the Sarkari Commission and Punji Commission. Whenever there is a question about cooperative federalism, this commission should be mentioned because these are the commissions for the central state relationship. Okay, Sarkari and Punji Commission. So when a question is being asked, you should know a political, especially in the paper 2, articles should be mentioned, your cases should be mentioned, any popular commissions are there, that should be mentioned in your answers. Okay. Way forward. Now this question is to critically analyze, right? So there should be a way forward. One is strengthening the institutional mechanism, clarity on governor's role. Now promote dialogue and consultation. There should be consultation between the states while before taking any decisions. Adherence to constitutional morality. So now in such a question, never make your personal opinions. You should be saying there are certain challenges to this, but the government should take measures to build trust. Okay, it should always end in a positive note. For India's democracy to thrive, institutional mechanisms must be strengthened to prevent central overreach and foster genuine collaboration between the center and the state. In paper 2, always give importance to your nation. Okay, you can be a little more nationalist in paper 2, especially in your conclusion parts of the questions. The Supreme Court emphasis on constitutional morality has been a recurrent theme in the recent judgments. Discuss how this doctrine has been used to expand the scope of fundamental rights. So this question particularly asks you about the recent judgments. So that you should know that recent judgments regarding it, and it's about constitutional morality. So now explain what is constitutional morality in your introduction part. What does it mean? It refers to the adherence to the core values and principles which are enshrined in the Constitution. Just give a few examples like the justice, liberty, equality, which is mentioned in your preamble of the Constitution. That is the constitutional morality. It talks about the values which the Constitution gives importance to. Now, expansion of fundamental rights to constitutional morality. That was the question, right? Now, one is Navjit Singh Johar vs. Union of India 2018 cases, which actually decriminalized homosexuality. That is against Article 14, 15 and 21. Okay, such questions should have cases and what article. It's about fundamental rights, right? So the mentioning of articles related to fundamental rights is important there. Which are the articles which are infringed by this judgments. Indian Youth, this is Shabrimala case. Indian Youth Young Lawyers Association with State of Kerala. Articles 14, right to equality. 25, right to freedom of religion. In Joseph Shine, which is Union of India, which decriminalize adultery. Article 21. Okay. More recently, in case Puttasamy, which is Union of India, that is your right to privacy become a fundamental right under this judgment. So, how did it affect it? Okay. So, the question should be supported with, the answer should be supported with cases, because the question itself is asking about on the context of the recent judgments. Now, though these judgments the court has interpreted constitutional provisions progressive, constitutional morality has been instrumental in liberating the fundamental rights from the shackles of conservative social norms. You should have a proper, because the points we have only mentioned about the cases and the points. Now we do not have enough space to say anything else. So that we have included it, we have made it an elaborate conclusion part. Okay, whether the how can we support, how can we maintain, or how can we prevent this constitutional morality from encroachment by the other organs of the government. Okay. The concept of one nation, one election has been revived with the formation of a high-level committee in 2023. Critically evaluate the feasibility and challenges associated with implementing the simultaneous elections in India. Actually, this question, it talks about the commission which was formed in 2023, which means that you may feel that this is not very relevant for us. But it's not like that, because these topics are always in the news. Okay, whether it is related to 2023 current affairs or 2024 current affairs, it is always in news, especially Election Commission of India. Okay, so this question should be the question is like critically evaluate the feasibility and challenges. Okay, feasibility and challenges, two parts are there. How is it feasible? Primary arguments are centered on efficiency and cost cutting. That is the primary argument of one nation, one election. Now, it is also argued that voter fatigue, it would combat the voter fatigue and lead to higher turnout. People do not have to come again and again for the elections. It is believed to enhance the administrative efficiency by minimizing the disruptions. Now, what are the challenges? So, mainly it has three challenges. One is constitutional hurdles, federalism and voter behavior, logistic challenges. So, I have divided the challenges under these three broad categories. You can also make it as different points. Okay. But it's always better to accumulate the points. It's always better to merge 2 or 3 points under a major subheading. So, what are the constitutional hurdles? It requires the amendments to the constitution, which actually requires some ratification by the states also, some of the articles. Federalism and voter behavior. Then logistic challenges. One is, it is costly. Despite the launch of multiple social welfare schemes, India continues to rank low on the Global Hunger Index. What are the key gaps in targeting and implementation of food security measure? So you know that we are talking about the we have so many welfare schemes, but irrespective of all the welfare scheme, we are ranking very low on the Global Hunger Index. So you should know the data, like what is our recent rank in the Global Hunger Index. 1/5 out of 125 countries. It's actually we have improved. It was earlier it was 115. From that we have improved to 105, which is actually significant progress. But still we are very low when compared to other countries. So what are the key gaps in the implementation? One is exclusion and identification. There is undernutrition, which is calorific sufficiency, leakages and corruptions. So when you are writing it in bullets, if you are able to provide a heading like this, it will be easy for the examiner to know what the paragraph or what the statement is about. And especially when you are writing it in bullets also, remember to explain it in 1 or 2 sentences. Okay, never just give a point as such. Okay, please explain it in 1 or 2 sentences. State-wise disparities, lack of monitoring and outcome focus, impact of pandemic and climate change. Okay, these are the gaps which are identified in targeting and implementation of the food security measures. Now, how do we see? Now you have mentioned about the challenges. So now you should have a way forward also. But the challenges are so big that we have almost taken a entire page, or like if you are writing it, it will take almost 2 pages to write it. So now, how can you address it? Addressing the exclusion errors, improve. Now since you have points, you will be writing that you have to address this. Your way forward will be based on these challenges, right? So that you can mention it in your conclusion itself. In the light of the Supreme Court recent observations of minority status being state specific, analyzed whether a redefinition of the minority based on the state demographics is constitutionally viable. It's asking you for your opinion if it is constitutionally viable or not. A state specific redefinition of minority. So you should mention about the articles which talks about minority and what are the minorities in India, and the major case which is related, Supreme Court case which is related to the minorities, TMA Pi Foundation with the state of Karnataka. Now the Supreme Court in Ashwini Kumar Upadhyay, which is Union of India India case, that is also a very recent case which is related to it. Whether the communities numerically dominant in the state should be continue enjoy minority status of benefits. It's a very controversial case as well, which means that in Lakshadweep, you know that Muslims are a majority, isn't it? And in Mizoram, the Christians are a majority, but they also enjoy minority rights. So whether it should be based on state-wise population. So that was the question here. So while a state-specific minority definition aligns with federal principles and ensures targeted protection, it also results in the fragmentation of the national identity. Okay. In conclusion, a redefinition of minority based on the state demographics is constitutionally viable and supported by precedent, which means that we have actually come to a final conclusion. Whether it is good or bad, whether we require it or not, whether it is constitutionally viable or not, we have actually arrived at a conclusion. But mention about the challenge and how can you overcome it. That should also be a part of the conclusion. Okay. Examine the role of diaspora diplomacy in strengthening India's bilateral ties with examples from recent developments in countries like USA, Canada and Australia. Here also the problem is, the talk is talking about the diaspora diplomacy. How are we using the diaspora, Indian diaspora, as part of our foreign relations? So that is the question. So what is diaspora diplomacy? Mention it in the introduction. Then how are we using, how are we using this diaspora diplomacy in strengthening our relationship with USA, Canada and Australia? If you see, we have a good relations with USA, we had good relations with Canada, but for the past couple of months, our relationship with Canada is strained. Even in Australia also, there were attacks against in the Indian community. So this question was asked in the context of these events. Okay. So while writing the answers also, so India, US, you mentioned about Howdy Modi and Namaste Trump. which was conducted in Houston and Texas and in Ahmedabad. So these two were actually very popular events during that time. Okay, so there should be a mention about these events. Then also, Kamala Harris is a Indian origin person. Then there are a lot of members of the Congress who are from India, who are originally from India. So mention about all these things. Then Sundar Pichai, like Satya Nadella, there are other US-based companies who are headed by Indian CEOs. So these things should be there. Now India, Australia also, we are having a trade relationship. We are also relaxing the student visa regime with Australia. These things are there. Yet there was an attack on the Indian community. India and Canada is the problem where we have certain tensions. Mention about it, and then we are actually trying to strengthen. Like in case if you are not able to remember the name of the person who was actually killed, just mention about the Khalistan issue over there. Okay, it's not necessary that you will have to remember all the names, but if you are not able to, just mention, just let the examiner know that you know about this issue. Okay, but even though it was like that, we are trying to engage actively with Canada. We are trying to strengthen our relationship with Canada. Now evaluate India's strategic interest in Africa in the context of increasing Chinese influence on the continent. The question is about strengthening Chinese influence in the African continent, and how are we taking that? How are we taking that? How are we strengthening our relationship with Africa in the context of this? Okay. So economically, earlier we were using this only for a like it was more of a humanitarian. See, our relationship with all the other countries is always on a humanitarian basis. Earlier we used to give aids to Africa, but recently we have it's like in the past 5 to 7 years only we have actually moved on to developmental projects. Earlier our relationship with Africa was only on giving humanitarian aids to these places, but now we are actually trying to diversify our sources of petroleum. We are trying to engage in economic trade with African countries. So how are we using the vital resources in Africa, especially the crude oils and the minerals? That is economic relationship. Now how are we, like China's string of pearls strategy is increasing the naval presence in, China is trying to increase its naval presence in the Indian Ocean region. So how are we considering Africa? You know that it's in the Indian Ocean region. So how are we strengthening? It's actually for the geopolitical reasons also. How are we strengthening our strategic relationship with Africa? Now to counter Chinese model, so the question is also about the Chinese, like the China is expanding its influence on the continent. So just have a mention about what China's policy is all about. So China is always have a debt trap diplomacy. So what China does is China finance all the developmental projects in the other countries and then lead them to a debt. That's what happened in the Sri Lanka. China was building a port in Sri Lanka, but later Sri Lanka was actually having economic debt because of China's aid. So this is how China was actually trying helping all the other countries, whereas India says human centric. We sent pharmaceuticals to Africa free of cost or at a very lower cost. Infrastructure projects we undertake in these countries. So it is then elaborating these points. Okay, so just have that mention it because the question is also about the Chinese influence. Focusing on capacity building, prioritizing digital and knowledge-based partnership, promoting people-to-people ties, encouraging a market-driven approach. Now, Global South is also a very important topic because India is emerging as a leader of the Global South. In the backdrop of economic slowdowns and global conflicts, the Global South faces a triple crisis of development, debt, and climate vulnerability. So the crisis is also mentioned in the question. You don't have to think about all the other challenges. So focus only on these three challenges and then support your answers with the points. Evaluate the role of multilateral financial institutions in addressing these challenges. What is the role of what are the multilateral financial institutions? World Bank, IMF, EDB, like that. Okay, so what is their role in addressing these challenges? That's the question. The global south is currently grappling with a triple crisis. Mention about it. Like you are just mentioning the points which are mentioned in the question itself. Now, what is the role of multilateral financial institutions? One is cyclical, counter-cyclical support, then knowledge and technical assistance, emerging climate mandate. Like all the multinational financial institutions, they are supporting the climate conferences and climate related developmental projects in countries. Now, what is the criticism? When such a question is asked, you should have the criticisms. Stringent conditionalities, like when you are providing loans, tougher conditions are imposed on countries, especially on underdeveloping or developing countries. Ineffective debt resolution, mismatched financial tools, outdated governance. Okay. Then how can we overcome this? This is also a very this way forward is based on these challenges, and that's the reason why it is given as a different points. It's based on these challenges. Debt architecture overall, expand financial capacities, shift to concessional finance. These are the points which actually, this is the role of multilateral financial institutions. Multilateral financial institutions is also a very important topic in your GS2 paper, and especially because this year UN and other financial institutions celebrate their 80th anniversary. Some are celebrating their 20th anniversary and all. Okay. As the Digital India mission completes a decade, it has transformed public service delivery and citizen government interface. However, challenges in inclusivity, digital literacy, and data privacy persist. Critically evaluate the achievements and limitations of Digital India mission over the last 10 years, suggest measures to address the emerging challenges in the digital governance. Digital India is also celebrating its 10 years this year. Okay, so this question was asked on the basis of that. So you should mention about what are the advantages of Digital India mission. One is digital infrastructure, e-governance, financial inclusion. Then what are the limitations and challenges of the mission? Digital divide, digital literacy, data privacy and security, cyber security threats. Now, when you have the achievements, critically evaluate the achievements and limitations, right? So, you have evaluated the achievements of it, you have evaluated the limitations of it. When you talk about achievements and limitations, there should be way forward also. How can we improve this Digital India mission? Inclusive infrastructure, enhance digital literacy, robust data protection, strengthen cyber security. See, even if you do not have the content to elaborate these points, just at least write 1 or 2 sentences. It does not necessarily that you can actually explain this this heading itself. Okay. But do not just write bullet points, like do not just end your statements in 1 or 2 words. You should complete it as a statement form. Now, 80 years after its formation, as I said before, UN's 80 year, UN's institutional architecture, particularly the Security Council, no longer reflects the realities of a multipolar world. So, this is also basically a criticism of the UN's role. Analyze the statement, highlight the key areas of reform needed to ensure the UN's continued relevance. So, they are asking you to suggest reforms for the improvement or to make it relevant for the to match the realities of the present world. So, what are the criticism? One is lack of representation. UNSC has only 5 permanent members. Now, under-representation of the global south, Africa was not represented. Key areas, what are the credibility deficit? Credibility deficit is lack of trust in the UN's activities. Key areas of reforms, what are the areas which require reforms? One is that expansion of the permanent, non-permanent seat, equitable. See here, this is also just points. But if you see this points actually gives you an idea, right? You are not required to explain the statements to convey what you are trying to say. So either the point should be written like this, or it should be in a full sentence. Expansion of permanent and non-permanent memberships to reflect regional diversity and rising powers, equitable representation for global south, limiting, abolishing a veto power, enhancing transparency, and empowering the General Assembly. The emergency of 1975 was a constitutional breakdown under constitutional cover, critically examining the statement in the context of constitutional provisions and their misuse. 50 years of emergency, 2025 is the 50 years of emergency. So this question also, it talks about what? Examining the statement in the context of constitutional provisions and their misuse. Here also, do not criticize it in a very strong language. Of course, emergency is not good for a democratic country, but remember to you should use a mild language to criticize it. Misuse of constitution, and the question is basically on what? In the context of constitutional provisions and their misuse. So they are actually told you where you should restrict your answers to. So here the misuse, how is it leading to the misuse of constitutional provisions? So one is Article 352, that is the proclamation of emergency. Suspension of fundamental rights, that was the major controversy regarding the emergency. Subversion of the judiciary, bypassing the cabinet, media censorship. Okay. So it should be like, it talks about this has actually led to, these are measures which, the emergency was a measure which actually led to the breakdown of our constitutional machinery, is something which was unfortunate, and that should not happen in the near future. So that's the way that has ended. Never, like emergency is not a thing that to be justified, but whenever you criticize it, mild your tone. That's it. Tribal identity and development need not to be contradictory. Analyze the role of tribal autonomy and self-governance under the 5th and 6th schedules. This also talks about the how is it protected under the 5th schedule and the 6th schedule. So what does it talk about in the 5th schedule? Preserving identity, guiding and developments. It is applicable to the 10 states, providing for tribal advisory councils and the governor's power to make. So you should know the differences between the 5th and the 6th schedule, and how is it leading to tribal autonomy and tribal development in under 5th and 6th schedule. That is also different. So you should know the difference. Only if you have the static knowledge of this, you will understand this question also. Okay. You will be able to write this question also. So such static related questions should have basic knowledge of the content, the static portions. Because 5th and 6th schedule, both of them talks about the tribal areas, tribal and scheduled areas. Okay. Now, what is the way forward? How can you empower these institutions? What are the effective implementation strategies which should be implemented? And how do we address the internal challenges of it? Now, GS3, the last topic. GS3 deals with technology. Economics, environment, disaster management, science and technology, biodiversity I have included in the environment portion. Okay. So these are the agriculture, economics and agriculture. So most of the questions are from agriculture sector in under part 3. Okay. And the problem with GS2 and GS3 paper is that some questions are actually, some topics are very common to GS2 as well as for GS3. So the way you answer GS2 and GS3 papers should be different. Okay, GS3 should be like, if the question is related to environment, it should focus more on environmental part. If the question is for economics part, it should focus more on the economics point of view. Okay, so that balance should always be there. Never write the same answers for the same questions in different papers. Gig economy, while providing flexible work opportunities, presents a precarious employment model that challenges the traditional social security and labor laws. Critically analyze the statement and suggest policy interventions to balance innovation and worker welfare in India. So it talks about the challenges, how this gig economy is challenging the traditional social security and labor laws in the country, and how can you suggest what are the policy interventions which are required to improve this. What are the challenges to worker welfare? One is lack of social security. So this question also you should introduce with what is gig economy, because it's a term. It's a term. So whenever there is a term in the question, start your introduction by defining the term. Challenges: lack of social security, wage volatility, absence of labor rights. Then how do you balance innovation with the worker welfare? That was the question. Redefining worker. So like when you are writing the answers also, if the question is like if in the question if it is explicitly mentioned, how do you balance innovation with the worker welfare, even if you do not know what to write, okay, under that, take that subheading, make it a take that point and make it a subheading. Make the examiner know you are actually going to answer that question. Answer it. Okay. Redefining the term worker, platform funded social security, transparent algorithmic governance, minimum wage and grievance redressal. So these points, you should have all these points in your hand. Like by preparing also, if you are not able to, like if you are not come across these points also, please make use of the internet and try to have this as a content for all your answers. Like if you have the content, if the question is about creative economy or the question is about any other care economy or anything, you can actually make use of this point. Okay. India's strategy to re-engage free trade agreements is crucial for integrating into global value chains. Discuss the opportunities and challenges for India in leveraging the free trade agreements to boost its manufacturing and export capabilities in protectionist global environment. The question is about the free trade agreements. So you can mention about the free trade agreements that India has recently signed with the other countries. Discuss the opportunities and challenges in India for leveraging the free trade agreements. That's the question focuses on. So what are the opportunities for India? One is market access and export growth, integration into global value chains, attracting foreign investment. Now, what are the challenges in a protectionist environment? What is protectionist environment? Where the economies are trying to protect their own domestic industries. So, one is domestic industry protection, rules of origin, non-tariff barriers. These are the geopolitical volatility. So, the two parts of the question are already being answered. Now, we come to the conclusion of it. Evaluate the potential of India's green hydrogen mission in achieving its energy security and climate goals. What are the key challenges in scaling up production and how can green financing play a critical role in overcoming them? So, this is actually by merging the economics and environment. Green hydrogen mission. Okay, so what is the economic viability? How can the green financing play a critical role in overcoming the challenges of hydrogen mission? So what is the potential of green hydrogen? Energy security, climate goals, economic and strategic potential. So these are the potential of green hydrogen. Okay, the viability of green hydrogen. What are the challenges of this mission? One is high cost of production, renewable power availability, technology gaps, lack of infrastructure, policy and regulatory uncertainty. Now, what is the role of green financing? So the question has two parts also. One was about what are the key challenges in scaling up production? How can green financing play a critical role in overcoming the challenges of the green hydrogen mission? So that's the second part of the question. So what is green financing? How is it actually helping to improve the scheme? One is mobilizing capital, de-risking investment, public-private partnership. Okay. If you have way forward, if you have suggestions, make it as bullet points. Union Budget 2025-26. Budget is also a major portion in your GS3 paper. Critically evaluate the strategy in the context of the fiscal consolidation roadmap. To what extent can public investment crowd in private investment in the current economic scenario? Like if the government investment is actually leading to private investment or not. Okay. So we talk about the Union Budget 2025-26. What is the trend of investment in the economy? That should come in the part. Like in the current affairs class, we actually discussed about the investment trend, the consumption trend, the savings trend. So these things, these facts are actually not to remember the facts, but to know about the trend in the economy. So that trend should be mentioned in the introduction part. Then crowding in private investment, what are the opportunities and the challenges? One is creating a growth enabling environment. The other one is leveraging economic conditions. India in the current scenario, like it actually helps to leverage the economic conditions where the government is able to fund, the government is able to make a private public investment, it can actually make use of the business in your scenario in the country. Now potential for crowding out, suggestions for a balanced approach. One is project implementation, boost non-debt financing, quality over quantity. A few points to actually substantiate your uh, whether it is actually leading to private investment or not, public investment, whether it is actually leading to private investment or not. If not, what are the suggestions that you can make to improve it? Recent military exchanges between Israel and Iran have demonstrated the growing role of asymmetric and high-tech warfare, particularly in the cyber and missile domains. Discuss the key lessons India can draw from this conflict for its own defense and cyber security preparedness. So this is basically India, Israel and all the foreign relations come part of the GS2 paper, but in GS3 it talks about the cyber security. Okay, what lessons India can actually draw from this conflict for its own defense and cyber security preparedness. So you should understand one thing, the actual UPSC mains paper will not be, the questions will not be this tough. But while practicing, while preparing, do prepare different angles, multi-dimensional questions, do prepare difficult questions, so that whenever a question comes, you will have some content with you to answer. Okay, these questions, these contents, these points, this cannot be per se, is not, may not be applicable to your answers as well, but you can use it in your other answers. A question on gig economy, it can actually be applied to orange economy or can be applied to care economy. So such points you should always have it in your hand. And the questions will not be this tough and will not be this elaborate also. But the themes will be more or less the same because it's current affairs. Okay. So India, when it comes to Israel and Iran, we all talk about the energy security. That's a very probable question, but it's a very expected question also. But the cyber attacks and how can what lessons India can learn from this is a slightly different theme, slightly different question, and that's why this question was put here. So what are the key lessons for India? Need for missile and air defense preparedness, cyber security as a core defense pillar. Cyber security is a very important area for your mains because every year we face some kind of a cyber attack from other countries. Okay, here also Israel has launched many cyber attacks on Iran. That was also one of the major reasons which actually led to this war between Iran and Israel. Okay, so drone and UAV threat. Drone threat India also faced during the Pahalgam attack. So Operation Sindoor attack. Asymmetric warfare capabilities, importance of technological sovereignty, indigenous development of AI-based surveillance system, the importance of indigenously based surveillance system. So all these things should be there. Here you can also mention about the cyber security schemes which India has also undertaken, or the cyber like our radar technologies, our drone technology, our AI based surveillance systems, you can mention it in your answers also. If like here you do not have a scope to mention it in the main content, but so that you can actually mention it in your conclusion. Now digital agriculture is the next frontier for India's farm sector. Analyze the role of AI, IoT, Internet of Things and remote sensing in improving crop productivity and risk management. So most of your questions related to agriculture will be related to your technology based agriculture, e-marketing or the government schemes, or it can also be related to technology and agriculture. So one is role of AI, one how is AI helping to improve the crop productivity, risk management, role of Internet of Things, that is corporate. So it talks about AI and Internet of Things. Okay, so mostly you'll have a tendency to write only about AI. So see, when it is exclusively mentioned in the question about AI and IoT, you should have that in your content. Both you should mention about it in your content, both AI and IoT. Crop productivity, risk management, role of remote sensing, crop productivity, risk management. How is this, like, if you see, I have taken only 2 points. It's basically how is AI helping in crop productivity, how is IoT helping in crop productivity and remote sensing, and how is remote sensing helping in crop productivity and risk management. Okay, you can either write it in this way, like take 1 or 2 points and how is different technologies helping in these 3 areas, or else you can make it in smaller points as well. Okay, if you have different dimensions to cover, you can make different points. But if you have only 1 or 2 or 3 points, then how is this technology helping in these 3 different arenas? Cold chain infrastructure is the backbone of the robust food processing ecosystem. Analyze the gaps and opportunities in India's cold chain and logistic network. So, what is cold chain infrastructure? That is what is mentioned in the introduction part. It relates to refrigerated storage, transport and processing unit, foundational element of modern food processing setup. Food processing industry is also a major question for your major area for your mains. Okay. Now, what are the gaps in India's cold chain network? One is fragmented and disconnected. It is disconnected. It is fragmented across different regions. Suboptimal storage capacity. We do not have enough storage capacity. High operational cost of operating this cold chain technology. Infrastructure and technology deficit. And what are the opportunities and potential of this cold chain technology? One is reduced post-harvest losses, boost food processing, enhance farmer income, export market. What is the role of this cold chain technology in improving the food processing industry? Now, what are the way forward? Like when you mention about the opportunities and challenges, you should always mention about the way forward also. The question is, the nature of cross-border threats to India has evolved significantly with the proliferation of the drone technology. The question is basically, it is focusing on the drone technology. Discuss this statement in the context of India's western and northern borders. What are the key elements of India's counter-drone strategy? Okay, so the question is actually on the drone technology focusing on western and the northern borders because they are the most distant borders of India. Now, how is it affecting the western border? With the western border, you have the Pakistan. So you can mention about the Operation Sindhu, you can mention about Pahalgam attack and all. The northern border, it is with the China. Now, what are the key elements? So that is the just one part of it. Another part is that what are the key elements of India's counter drone strategy? So that is the major part of the question. Okay, it does not, it only asks you about how is it affecting it, what are the evolving threat on these western and the northern borders, but the question is actually about what India's counter drone strategy. So that should be given more focus. One is layer detection, soft skill and hard skill. What is soft skill? Using jammers is what you call it soft skill. Like GPS signal, jamming the GPS signal, jamming the like forcing it to land or return. DRDO has developed an anti-drone system that uses radio frequency jammers. This is a recent development. Now, hard skill means physically destroying this drone. That is what is hard skill. Soft skill means you are using jammers to destroy the drones. Now, indigenous technology development, mention about the recent space and defense developments by the DRDO and ISRO. Policy and inter-agency coordination. Okay. So, what does India's counter development strategy focuses on? It focuses on what? Indigenous development, layered defense. See, it's basically you summarize the points with the body content. Okay. The increasing frequency of urban floods and heat waves highlights the growing convergence of climate change and unplanned urbanization. Discuss the institutional and technological reforms which are needed to enhance India's urban disaster preparedness and resilience. So, what are the institutional reforms which is required? Decentralized. So, you should talk about what are the urban disasters which are that our cities are actually facing these now. That should be your introduction. Now, what are the institutional reforms? One is decentralized governance, integrated land use planning, community-based initiatives. Then what are the, it asks you about the institutional and technological reforms in separate. So institutional reforms should be there and technological reforms should also be mentioned. So when you have like explicitly, when the question is explicitly asking you to mention the reforms, you can merge all this. But if it is asking about institutional reforms and technological reforms, that should be a separate heading and should have points to write under different headings. Advanced early warning system, data-driven infrastructure, smart communication networks. Discuss the economic and social challenges of decarbonization, including the imperative of a just transition. Just transition, we recently studied a lot. Just transition is what? Considering the develop, like when you are shifting from one particular sin to another, it should not lead to further exploitation of the vulnerable sections. That is what is called as just transition. So what India faces in this journey towards achieving net zero by 2070. So what are the economic challenges of decarbonization? Decarbonization, you can mention about the global shipping industry, we are decarbonizing it. Automobile industry, we are trying to decarbonize it. Give examples like this. And then you should talk about the economic challenges. One is immense capital requirement, maintaining economic competitiveness, energy security and grid stability. What are the social challenges which are associated with just transition? One is livelihood disruption, regional inequality, reskilling and upskilling. Now, since you have mentioned about the challenges, way forward also. Establish a dedicated just transition fund, sector specific phase, green job creation, all this. Okay. And how is it actually helping India's net zero journey? That should be your conclusion. Evaluate the strategic importance of India's Gaganyaan mission. How will a successful human spaceflight mission contribute to India's technological autonomy, scientific research and its global standing in the space domain? This can also be a question for your next mains as well. Okay, because Gaganyaan, India is spending a lot of money on space missions. So how is it contributing to our technological autonomy, scientific research, global standing in the space domain? 3 specific areas are asked. So what is this contribution to technological autonomy? Like how did we develop our indigenous technology to fund this or to carry out this Gaganyaan mission? What is our contribution to the scientific research? Okay. Like it has actually led to experiments in the field like material science, space biology, human psychology. So what is our potential? What are the potential applications and how did it contribute to scientific research? Now contribution to global standing. Where do we stand in the space technology? Okay, what are the advancements that we created because of the Gaganyaan mission? So it's a game changer that transcends national pride. So as I mentioned, when such questions where India's advancement is asked, be a nationalist in your answer, enter your answer in a very positive note. Evaluate the strategic implications of the US-China plus one strategy for India's manufacturing sector. How can India leverage this new trade agreements and production-linked incentives to attract US companies and integrate them into the supply chains, particularly in sectors like electronics and semiconductors? So it's actually talking about how is this China plus strategy is helping in the manufacturing sector, special focus on electronics and semiconductors. Okay. Strategic implications, boost to domestic manufacturing, integration to global. China plus one strategy is what? The world is looking for an alternative to China and India is trying to be that alternative. That is what is called as China plus one strategy. So how is it helping our manufacturing sector? It is boosting our domestic manufacturing, integration into the global supply chains, technological upgradation, employment generation. Now, how is it leveraging the production linked schemes and trade agreements? One is India can strategically leverage this by offer financial interventions to the companies. Priority sector lending is there. Trade agreements. We are engaging into free trade agreements with USA and other European countries. Sector specific focus. Electronics, semiconductors, medical devices and US firms are actively diversing. So sector specific focus can also be given. So how is it offering a unique window of opportunity to India to become a global manufacturing hub. That can also be your, that you can also explain it a little more also. Okay. Biotechnology like CRISPR-Cas9, this is a very core science question. Immense promise for addressing health and food security challenges. However, they also raise profound ethical questions, discuss ethical and regulatory challenges associated with gene editing in India. So it basically talks about the ethical issues which are concerned with the gene editing. What are it? Germline is somatic editing. These are like, as I mentioned, these are what? Very technical science questions. Okay. So unless you know it, you cannot write such questions. But ethical issues, you can actually mention other issues. So here, what are the ethical debate? Like germline editing means it changes to eggs or sperms or embryos, versus somatic, like it changes the non-reproductive cells. One is changing the reproductive cells, other is changing the non-reproductive cells. So it can actually, when somatic cells are altered, it can lead to your like disease recovery. You can actually use it in like modifications can be helpful in the medical field, whereas in the other it is actually trying to create a better version. So that creates an ethical issue over there. One is for the medical purposes, another is for the cloning kind of thing. Okay. Eugenics and designer babies, the potential, these are all terms which you will find in your newspapers and all. Okay, it is a very commonly used terms. You may be hearing for the first time, but it's a very commonly used terms. Okay, the potential for using gene editing for not therapeutic enhancements, like other than for disease treatment. It raises fear in the form of eugenics. So, like you actually, maybe you particularly choose a particular trait, a beauty or intelligence, and you are trying to edit it to create a better offspring. So then it raises the concern of an ethical issue there. Sometimes like some people will have some genetic issues, genetic diseases. By using that gene to alter that gene to avoid such diseases is actually a beneficial thing. Whereas altering the gene to produce a better offspring, better intelligent person, then it is not a good thing. So that is the ethical issue concerned here. So what are the regulatory challenges over here? One is lack of specific legislations. We do not have specific legislations focusing on gene editing. Overlapping jurisdictions. One is you have genetic engineering appraisal committee and the review committee on genetic manipulation. Their rules and regulations are slightly overlapping and slightly different also. Okay. Enforcement and biopiracy. So these are the ethical issues which are concerned with it. Even if you are not able to know any terms, or you can actually think about it, right? What are the ethical issues? Like gene editing, it basically alters the DNA of a person. So what could be the ethical issues which are associated with it? Remember one thing, the question is particularly asking you about the ethical issues. It does not ask you about any other issues. Okay, so like constrain yourself to the ethical issues of that particular aspect. And see, you can expect such core science questions in your mains paper as well. Even if you do not know, do not leave any questions. At least try to write one or two paragraphs or one or two statements regarding it. Okay. The last question. The effectiveness of monetary policy is often contingent on the efficiency of its transmission to the real economy. Examine the key factors that hinder the monetary policy transmission mechanism in India. What measures have been taken by the RBI to improve it? So the question is basically about the monetary policy transmission. So it refers to the process through which the central bank's policy rate or charges, or how it is passing on to the lenders and the borrowers. Okay, how is it passing on to the lending and the depository? So that's what is monetary policy transmission means. So what are the factors which are hindering this transmission? One is external benchmark versus internal cost of funds, high proportion to the fixed rate loans, small saving schemes, weak bank balance sheet. Then what are the measures which are big balance sheet is what? NPA, non-performing assets. When you are not repaying your loan for more than 90 days, it becomes a non-performing asset. So one of the major problems that the Indian economy is facing now is non-performing assets. So whenever there is a question on monetary policy, there should be a mention about the non-performing assets as well. Now, what are the measures which are taken by the RBI? One is external benchmark means lending rate. There is a conflict between the external benchmark, like what are the global benchmark and also the Indian benchmark. So that should be, so our rate should be fixed according to the external benchmark. Now, liquidity management, how can we use open market operations to fluctuate the liquidity in the economy? Basel norms and the NPA resolution. Basel norms is actually a banking related norms, and how can we align this Basel norms with the NPA resolution in our country? So this is how you actually frame a question, frame an answer to different sections of the questions. Actually, these are more. This is more for the 2025 current affairs. Okay, and moreover, understand the words, the terms which are being asked in the question. Depending on that, frame your answers. You can actually, some people ask if you can, the bullet points, whether you can number the bullet points. You can number the bullet points provided you have contents to write. If you have many points like 10 or 15 points or 8 to 10 points, you can actually number the points. But if you do not have, then at least go for bullets. Okay. Then depending on the, like the question specifically asked about 2 or 3 sections, then do not go for bullet points, rather go for paragraphs. And if you go for paragraphs, make sure you underline the important points there. Okay. So these are in general. The rest of the things in the process, like when we are studying the static portions and when we are dealing with the current affairs, we'll study the answers for it. Okay. Thank you.